Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you guys so much for joining us. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with the slides so that you guys can follow along. Okay, can everyone see my screen? Okay, cool. Hi, everyone. Thank you guys so much for coming to the second of our webinar series. This one is on audio and video recording for language documentation and revitalization. So, hi everyone, my name is Jillian. I am a PhD student at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. I am in linguistics and I study language documentation and revitalization. I'm based here in Honolulu, Hawaii. And I work on a language called Yapese. It's spoken in the Federated States of Micronesia, Yap State. And it is an oceanic language, so it is not of the Micronesian subgroup, even though it is spoken in the region. So today I'll just kind of start by talking about audio recording. I'll talk a little bit about video recording, and then I'll talk at the end about recording using your phones and other types of technology. So what are recordings used for? The main reason that linguists take recordings is so that we can perform linguistic analysis on them. But they can also serve a purpose for community members in that they can be used for teaching and pedagogy, and then they also serve as a way to preserve important cultural speeches, legends, folk tales, poems, and different types of things like that. So when you're choosing a recording environment, especially when you're in a foreign country or something like that, or even if just say you need to be outside for some reason, you can't just always control where you record. So you kind of just have to make the best of the situation. Sometimes it'll be less than ideal, but that's okay, and you kind of just work with what you have. When at all possible, choosing a beneficial setting can dramatically improve the quality of the recording. I personally am a phonetician, so I work on kind of the production, speech production, and I really am looking for very high quality, kind of as noiseless as possible from like background noise recordings as possible. So I try to really kind of highlight that and prioritize that when I'm making recordings. Um, Sometimes when you're listening back to recordings, you can hear background noise, usually like a fan or even like the air conditioning or something that you don't really hear in your everyday life, but they can be very distracting and destructive when you're recording. So just kind of be on the lookout for that. Things you should try to avoid, fans and electrical appliances like a fridge or something, they kind of just have an ambient noise. Traffic like from cars, kids running around, they love to yell and scream, they're so cute, but the yelling can kind of get in the way of the recording. Animals, I personally have to deal with a lot of chickens where I record. They just love to come and like sit near me when I'm recording and just like cock-a-doodle do all the time, unfortunately. Any background chatter from other people, cell phones ringing or going off, people tapping on the table is a pretty common one. And then another thing that I deal with in my recordings, is people chewing or eating. So maybe just asking people like, hey, for like a 5 minute recording, can we maybe not eat? And then like take breaks and stuff like that as people are get hungry and stuff. In terms of an ideal recording environment, what you want is ideally something indoors. Again, it's okay if you have to be outdoors, and something that's like kind of it's called like a soft room. So anything that you can use to kind of dampen any sound or echoes in the room. It doesn't have to be in a recording studio or anything like that, but just kind of anything that's like vaguely insulated. You can use things that you have around, like towels or blankets, or just kind of like anything to kind of dampen the walls and stuff like that. If possible, you want the windows closed if you're inside, because then you don't get the background noise from outside. Um, Birds are really pretty and they make fun noises, but they can be quite noisy. And listening back to a lot of my recordings, I do have a lot of birds just kind of singing in the background, which isn't ideal. Again, no appliances or fans running, no children if possible, although in a lot of situations there are going to be kids around and you just kind of have to deal with that. And then minimizing extra people in the room or like in the section of the room where you're working is ideal. In terms of audio recording equipment, there are specific devices that are dedicated audio recorders, and that's what we recommend using if you have access to them. Two of the most famous brands or ones that we use a lot are Tascam and Zoom. I personally like Zoom. My professor likes Tascam. It's just kind of whatever like ends up working for you. They're about comparable in price. And these ones, they run on batteries, so they don't add like an extra background noise of like an extra like uh, electrical wire or anything like that. And they come with microphones built in, but you can also, what's nice about them is you can connect them to multiple external microphones, which again heightens the quality of your audio recording. There are different types of microphones you can choose. So there's one that's called a shotgun mic, um, which is this one here on the left. And those ones are kind of good. They're like if you think of like a boom mic that you see in movies, that's kind of what it is. It's good at getting kind of like a targeted like sound, a target person come from kind of far away. You can put it on a stick and kind of hold it. Handheld mics are good for kind of if someone is talking, giving speeches, maybe not the greatest for recording. It's kind of generally better to use something like what you see on the right, which is a lapel mic or a lavalier mic, that you can like pin on someone. Usually they can kind of forget about it. They're quite light a lot of the times, and so it's easy to just kind of pin and people forget about it. And then as you can see on these two, there are these little like foam things on top of it. Sometimes they're made out of like fabricy stuff. And it's called a dead cat, which is a very sad name for it. But this helps minimize like popping sounds, especially from like p and duh and like plosive sounds that we call them. Another thing to take into consideration when you're choosing a microphone and when you're kind of positioning the microphone is directionality. So they have unidirectional microphones. So an example of it is cardioid. So as you can see, these like little circular drawings is kind of like what the microphone is picking up. So this is in one direction, kind of a little bit more than 180. They also have supercardioid, which gets what's in front of you and then a little bit of the sound behind you. There's omnidirectional, which gets pretty much everything 360 around. And then there's bidirectional, so it gets in front of you and behind you, or the microphone. And these are used for different things. If you're trying to get one speaker, a cardioid microphone is great. If you're trying to get maybe like a conversation between two people who are sitting on either side of the microphone, bidirectional is great. If you're trying to get an entire room of people, maybe an omnidirectional is better, or just like miking each person individually. So a lot of questions, the time we get the question of like, why not just use your computer or your phone's microphone to record? And this is something you can do. And if you're in a pinch, it's completely fine to do. We say, so any recording is better than no recording. But the issue with phones and computers is that the microphones in them are actually designed to cut off certain frequencies, especially the high frequencies. And this can kind of mess with the recording, especially if you're taking acoustic measurements of it. And they are designed to like remove background noise, so that kind of filters out some of the stuff that you want. Um, and then computers themselves, if you've ever kind of like turned on your computer and it needs to work really hard to do something, like the fans turn on and it gets quite loud, they inherently have this kind of ambient background noise that can show up in recordings. And yeah, anything is better than nothing, but if you do have access to equipment and stuff like that, it's better to use that. But if a lot of us just have phones, if you're kind of like an impromptu thing, you're like, oh, this would be really cool to record. I don't have a recorder. Let me just whip out my phone. Again, that's okay to do, and it's important to do because you're not always going to have equipment on you, and it's not always going to be a situation that's like appropriate to pull out, your big audio video recording equipment. Maybe it's just easier to do it on your phone. But when you do, it's easiest if you position the mic close to the speaker, about 4 to 6 inches away. You should make a practice recording and then listen back to it using headphones, so that you make sure, you're talking at the right tone. You don't need to move it further forward or backward, and it's not too loud. Um, you're gonna place it on a table or a surface, or a lot of people get tripods these days that you can kind of clip your phone into. Um, and it keeps it steadily and it avoids like kind of like rattling around or something. And it should be about level with your mouth. You want to make sure that your phone's in airplane mode so that you don't have like dings or texts coming through when you're recording, um, or calls that will interrupt the recording. And then if you can buy fairly reasonably priced microphones that you can kind of just connect into your phone. and then use that. So that's better than just using the internal microphone. At least you have some kind of like external mic. Maybe it can be closer to you on the lapel or something like that. You definitely want to check your sound levels. So in a recording, especially, if you're looking at taking phonetic data from it, or you just like want to be able to hear what's being said, it can be the recording can be kind of messed up a little bit if it's too quiet or if it's too loud. So if it's too loud, what happens is it's called clipping. So it'll cut off actually the kind of top and bottom frequencies. Um, and then if it's too quiet, you can't hear, and it's hard. So on a video audio recorder, a designated audio recorder like the Zoom or the Tascam, to check the audio levels, what you do is you press the record button one time, and then the recorder light starts blinking, and you can actually see the level. So as you talk into it, you can see how it goes, and if it like will go off the screen if you're talking too loud. So you just place the microphone where it will be, and the audio recorder where it will be, have people talk, kind of check the levels, and if you need to adjust it, there are buttons on the side of those where you can adjust the gain. So how much sound the microphone is taking in, essentially. And you want it to be as loud as possible without it clipping. So there's kind of like a sweet spot in there. In terms of recording procedures, the one of the other really nice thing about the designated audio recorders is that you can change the hertz that it picks up and the bits. So and then also what format that it records in. So if you can, this is the best. This is kind of the standard. This 44.1 kilohertz and 16 bits per second in wave format, which is lossless. Things like an MP3 file will actually compress it, and so you'll lose some of the information that you want, some of the frequencies. You hit record once, you test the audio levels, you say some sentences, you can adjust it, and then you press record a second time to begin. And that's a really important step because there have been times where I have forgotten to press record the second time and I've had to restart a recording because of that. And that, it's a waste of time. People get kind of annoyed sometimes. And so you want to avoid that as much as possible. So now moving on to video recording. Um, Another question people ask is why would you make video recordings? Why isn't audio enough? Um, and I just one of the answers to that is that language is much more than speech. It's spoken languages, right? It includes facial expressions to get across things and gestures, both like didactic gestures like this and that, but also things to show like the size of things or just kind of idiosyncratic things that people do as they talk. And this is an important part of language, especially things for like conversations, turn taking, things like that. Um, I also work with sign languages, and for sign languages, right, they make exclusive use of visual stimuli. And so audio recording would basically do nothing for these languages. So it's really important for them, especially to have access to video recordings because like drawings or pictures and stuff isn't quite enough to capture the whole modality of that. Um, Video recording allows us to see the language in context, right? If someone is saying, oh yeah, I know, like teaching how to tie a knot, for example, right? You put this through there and then you wrap it around here and you do that. Like if you don't have the video accompanying it, it's really hard to understand and to see kind of like what the person is even talking about. And then in terms of pedagogical materials and resources actually for language communities, videos are usually more engaging than just listening to an audio. It's nice to be able to see people's faces and hear their voices along with it. And it's just a more useful dynamic resource. There are some downsides of video. The one big one is that it is more expensive. So an audio recorder, a nice one, will run you about $100 to $200 for like one of the Tascams or the Zoom ones. Video recorders, again, nice ones can run you, upwards of like $500, $600, and that's on the low end. So they are a much more expensive equipment to purchase. Um, Although, sometimes it is worth it. It can also sometimes be distracting. Some people don't like to be on camera. People can be shy, and this can kind of result in people not feeling as comfortable and not getting as naturalistic speech as you would otherwise. The files created by videos also are quite much larger because they include, video in addition to the audio. So if storage is an issue, then that's something to think about as well. And then oftentimes you have to, actually most of the time, if you're using separate audio and video recorders, you have to align them, which you have to use outside software for. And there is free software, but a lot of like if you're trying to do like documentary style stuff, kind of more higher level video editing, those softwares are you have to pay for. Talking about kind of the positioning and where you want everything, you want the camera for your visual recording to be situated at about the subject's face or the two subject spaces or however many people are going to be in the recording. Um, you don't want it below them, so it's kind of weird. You can do a little bit above, pointing down, and that's just kind of so that you get the person's face and you can get all the gestures. You can attach an external microphone, like a boom mic, for example, one of the ones I showed earlier. That's a good one to attach to the top of a video recorder. But also you should have the external audio device recorder if you have one attached to a microphone. And ideally, right, these video recordings are accompanied by a separate audio recording, and then you align them using the software afterward. Something to think about for the video recordings is framing. So framing is just kind of like what do you actually see in the viewfinder? What do you see in the video frame when you're recording? So you want to aim for kind of a wide shot so that the person could reach all the way out and gesture. And you want to keep it on a tripod as much as possible because you want like a stable video and you don't want it to be moving around or zooming in and out. You want to include
Mhm.
kind of the upper bodies of person with enough, again, enough space to kind of move around. So you can see in this picture, right, they're holding their arms out 'cause that's as far as they would extend. So they're just trying to check to make sure they could do that in the photo. You want to make sure one of the really important things is focus. And so that the focus is actually on the people in the video and not on like, a tree in the background or something like that, because then everything else gets kind of out of whack. And you want to, again, avoid moving the camera around while you're recording if possible. So here's some examples of bad framing, right? In the first one, you can barely see the person's face. In the second one, it's way too high and it's like looking down at them and it's not a great, very flattering image. And then in the last one, again, the person is kind of like off to the side. You want the people to be in the frame as much as possible, like in this photo. Um, and you can see they have enough room to gesture, and they're both in the frame. You can see kind of their upper bodies. And then again in this one, the participant is able to extend his hand fully. And this in this recording, even when he like moves around a little bit, he's able to, you can kind of see his whole, everything he's gesturing in the frame. One other thing important to think about is lighting. So settings that are backlit have the like light behind them, so a bright window, a lamp, or anything like that. And this ends up casting a shadow on the person's face, which is not what you want. You also want to avoid any like direct like overhead lights, very harsh lighting, because these create stark shadows and it's hard to see the person's face. Um, People use different kinds of lighting to kind of like illuminate the person's face. You can bring your own like light source, like people do when they take photos and things like that. You can use your phone, the like flashlight on your phone, just basically anything you can do to kind of illuminate the person in the frame and kind of their movements. Late afternoons and overcast days are good times and days to record because they kind of have this soft lighting. There's not a lot of shadows, and so you're not going to have to worry about this outside these issues from the lighting and stuff. And then you can check what's called the white balance. This is kind of helping with adjusting the colors. So if you just take like a piece of white fabric or a piece of white paper, just a plain piece of paper, and put it in front of the camera, and it will kind of help adjust it to kind of natural colors. Here's an example of bad lighting, right? The window behind it is very clear, but you can't see this person's face at all. So that's not really going to help you if you're trying to do kind of like linguistic analysis. This is good lighting, right? You can see that it's maybe not good framing because it's a little too close, but it's good lighting. You can see the people's faces clearly. There's no kind of harsh lights or shadows and stuff on them. And then, like I mentioned before, if you use separate audio and video recorders, which we do recommend you doing if possible, then you have to align them at some point. So for the video's microphone, it's likely omnidirectional, so it will probably get a lot of the background noise and stuff that you don't want. So it's a good idea to use an external microphone, even though. But you can use the internal one as a backup. And when you start the video, so you want to start um, by slating, it's called. It's like when in the movies they have like the director's thing and they like do usually you use clapping. One of our consultants actually really liked the little thing, so we got her one to use because she had fun with it. And you just clap in front of the camera so that it aligns the audio and the video recordings very easily. Um, on the next slide, I'll show you. It's really nice. This is DaVinci Resolve. A lot of programs will do it for you. So you really just you highlight the two of them and you click align by waveform, which is those waveforms, and it will do this for you. And then you can kind of cut it to what you need. So you can cut it right before then. But it's nice. You don't have to like fiddle around with it to get it to align. It just is nice there, and then and then you can kind of mute the internal audio and just use the nice audio. So here's kind of a recording checklist of the things you should think about and go through as you're choosing a place to record and the stuff you're going to record with. You know, will this location be good audio? Is it as inside as possible? Is it insulated if possible? How's the lighting doing? You always want to set up everything, the audio recorder, make sure no one's connected to it. So you want to make sure that everyone who needs to be heard on the recording can be heard. You have to think about the polar patterns, which is those kind of drawings of what microphones give you what sound kind of earlier. You check the gain level, so how much sound is being taken in by the recorder, and then the volume to make sure it's not clipping or too soft. You want the camera to be on a tripod, like I said. You want to make sure everyone is in frame and that they have enough room around them to gesture if they do. You check the white balance and the lighting to make sure nothing is too harsh or shadows. You can see everyone. And then you want to check the gain levels on the camera audio as well, because that is your backup in case something happens. Because sometimes things happen. Something runs out of battery, something doesn't get recorded properly. You forget to hit the recording button on the second time. Like things just kind of happen. So it's really nice to have backups. Um, you press the audio recorder a second time, and then you press record on the camera. It's kind of the steps to recording. So most cameras record in what's called HD, or it's called like an MTS file or .mov file sometimes, and these need to be converted into MP4s to use for like the conversion software. You can do these online. Sometimes websites will send you or like let you do like certain bits at a time. Sometimes they'll let you do the whole thing. Just kind of depends. Um, we can also use software and stuff. So Handbrake is a good platform for this. And then there's many different softwares you can use to align them, like I said earlier. DaVinci Resolve is the one that I personally use. This is free. The other ones are like OpenShot, Lightworks, HitFilm, and then paid options include things like Adobe Premiere, which you can usually get through some kind of institutional affiliation if you work for like a university or something. And there are a bunch of just different options out there from kind of more easy to use ones to more professional ones, whatever kind of fits your needs or you feel comfortable using. So let's talk about online and smartphone recording because, a lot of times we work with people who are far away. Maybe you have people working on your project who are spread all around the world. And a lot of times you can't do recordings in person, and that's okay. Actually, during my undergrad, when I was working on my thesis, because of COVID, I wasn't able to meet with any of the people that I was supposed to be meeting with. So we had to meet on Zoom and do all of our recordings on Zoom. So I had to kind of firsthand work with this. Um, One of the nice things is that Zoom is pretty good. It's gotten even better since what is that, 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, when I was doing mine. So Zoom can record in HD, which is 720. It's kind of a standard. It's possible, but the video quality kind of depends on the strength of your internet connection. So if you're in a place with good internet, then the video quality you can get is quite good. But if it involves more than two people, you have to have kind of like a paid account to record in HD. Again, usually you can get these through kind of a university or institutional affiliation. How you record on Zoom, sorry, this is I'm not sure if what's it called? PC computers are different. I only have an Apple computer and an iPhone, so that's kind of what I'll be explaining. Maybe someone else can do it for Android if it looks different or PC. So when you go into settings for Zoom and you choose the video tab, you can kind of go down here and choose what the camera is. So if you have like an external webcam, you can use that. You can use the internal one if you have it on your computer. And then you go down here and you hit HD. So that will record in high quality HD. That's how you set the video settings. And you can also go and set the audio settings. So right below it is the audio one. You can kind of change the settings as you want them, but one of the things that's nice is that it can check the input level. So it can check, if you're talking too quietly, if you're talking too loud, it'll show that here, just like it would on an audio recorder. And then you can also choose where the recording goes. So it's really nice if if you make a folder already that you're going to put your recordings in for like your project or whatever, you can pre-choose that and it'll automatically, when the Zoom room closes and the recording is processed, it'll automatically go into that folder, which is really nice. And then another thing you can do is, right, depending on your IRB and your consent form and the comfort of your participants, you can choose whether it shows the participants' names in the recording or whether it doesn't. Right, they show up on Zoom, but you can choose whether it does. So that kind of helps with like privacy and things like that. If you're recording on Zoom, although you can't, since it does have the internal audio and that does come out as a separate file, that's great to have as a backup. But if possible, it's also really good to try to record on an audio device separately. So either like a smartphone or a designated audio recorder. What I did with my participants is I had them record their voices on their end. I recorded my voices with the questions on my end. And then at the end, since I had it all slated, it all just kind of fit together really nicely when I was able to align everything. That's a way so that you still can ensure you're getting the best possible audio and video, um, but maybe not in the most ideal situations or in far situations. So how you record, at least on an iPhone, is you can go into the Voice Memos app, you click the little record button, it's very straightforward. It'll record, it'll give you like this automatic name for wherever your location is. You can go ahead and change that. And then if you click here on the little dots in the corner, in the circle, you can share it from there. And then that's how you send it to like your computer or your email or anything like that, or whoever needs to have access to it. Metadata and archiving is also a really important part of what we do as documentary linguists. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that because this kind of goes into the audio and video recording stuff. So one of the important things you want to do at the start of every recording is metadata. So this is kind of
Recording.
data about your data. Um, and this situates your
Organism.
recording in the context of where it is, when it is. It makes it much easier to
Alright,
find specific recordings at a later
I'm ready
date.
now.
So if you know what date you recorded, it's much easier to find that in a catalog that you create, or like in a like spreadsheet if you create one of those. However you choose to organize your metadata. It also provides information about like that individual recording and the circumstances around it. So you include who is talking in the video, who's included, both you, the person interviewing or the person eliciting, and the person speaking. The language, what language you're talking about or speaking, what date the recording was made, where it was made, what kind of recording. So is it a word list? Is it a song? Is it a narrative? Is it a dance? What kind of recording is it? And then kind of a little 1, 2 sentence blurb about what the recording is about. Um, this is really important. So it's nice to be able to, at the very beginning, right? If you're listening to the recording, you have like a 2, 3 minute section kind of explaining it. So if you just need to get a quick gist of what's going on, that's really helpful to have access to. One other thing that's important is file naming. And again, this is really helpful in being able to later locate and identify your recordings. Um, so these names tell you kind of who, when, and what. So it's a little bit of like a summary almost of like what is in the recording. And if you name things poorly or if you're not consistent, then it makes it really difficult to find files. So some examples of bad names is my poem. what poem, who's my, what language is it in, tells you nothing. Another bad example is STE001. So a lot of the times when you record the on an external audio device, it will spit out a random name, usually in this format, or mono if it's in like mono. This the ST is for stereo. And that'll be kind of the default name it spits out, and you want to go in and change that to a better name instead of just keeping it like that. Because again, tells you nothing. Examples of good file names, right, are these three down below. It gives SS is like the name of the person likely recording. The date is really important, and then what it is, a frog story. Frog story is one of the elicitation techniques that we use in documentation. And so that tells you right there just by looking at the title, um, who's in it, what it, or like when it was done, what is it. The thing you could add to this maybe is like the language name. And this kind of leads into ISO codes. So an ISO code is a three-letter identifier that gives a brief, unique name for most of the world's languages. Some dialects, it's kind of unclear. Some kind of they bunch things together sometimes, but for the most part, it gives a unique name for each of the world's languages. For example, the language I work on, Yapese, is YAP. Hawaiian is HAW, Palauan is PAU, and so on and so forth. You can find a full list at SIL.org. Um, but right, if you're going to go back to these ones and add, kind of make them even better file names, you would put in kind of the language. So if this person, Simpson or Sean Simpson, is speaking Palauan, for example, you would put PAU, excuse me, in there, that kind of, so that the who, the what language, the what is it, and then the when, just all by looking at that file name. And then the last thing I'm going to talk about is archiving. So archiving is really important for this field, especially. We want all of our recordings to last for as long as possible, right? A lot of times, these recordings serve as a record for the language. Depending on the level kind of endangerment of the language, it could be some of the last recordings. We want them to be accessible as long as possible so people can benefit from them. There's a bunch of different archives from different institutions. Here at the University of Hawaii, ours is called Kaipuleo Hone. So all of the students in our department, when they go out and do field work, they archive the recordings in Kaipuleo Hone. That's managed by the university so that we know that it will be here for much longer than any of us will be. There are also ones called like Paradisic, for Indian languages, ELAR, there's a bunch of them that you can kind of deposit to and that they'll store the data and the recordings for you. You also want to ensure that you have multiple copies stored on hard drives or in the cloud. Usually three is the magic number. So when I do it, I usually have one copy on my computer, one on an external hard drive, and then one on Google Drive. So you kind of want to make sure they're in different places so that just in case, right, if you only have one recording of something and the file gets corrupted or it gets lost or your computer breaks or something like that, you want to make sure you have a backup because if you don't, then you've lost that recording. That's kind of all that I have for you guys. If you have any questions, now's the time to do it. Mahalo nui. If you want to contact me or LDTC, here's my email and also the LDTC email. But thank you guys so much for having me. Any questions? Um, okay. In the cultural context. Hmm. Oh, good question. Avery Cole. Should you aim to have a shotgun mic around 6 inches from the speaker as well? Um, yes, that's one. Okay, so it depends on the kind of uh shotgun mic you have. Usually, if you're trying to get one that's kind of closer to the speaker, that wouldn't be the most ideal one. It's usually if you're kind of far away and you're trying to um, get it into the frame or it's attached to the video recorder, so that's going to be a little bit farther away. If you want to be closer to the person, it's better to use kind of like a lapel mic or even a mic that's kind of mounted on what's it called? A tripod in front of the person. May I ask if we can use smartphones for video recording, downsides and advantages? Okay, so I'm actually a huge proponent of using smartphones for video recording. And I'll tell you why. So a lot of the times smartphones, especially these days, like have really good cameras and the video quality comes out actually better than um like designated like video recorders in a lot of ways. And they can also record in HD. They can even record in 4K a lot of the times. Um, the downside I would say to it is that video uh what's it called? Sucks a phone battery like nobody's business. It's crazy. So if you are recording with a phone, I would try to record in smaller sets, and then also maybe have it connected to a power source if possible. It's also really good if you are recording with a camera to, again, not, or a phone camera, to not just hold it with your hands. You want to get a little tripod or designated tripod. It's really easy to get clips and stuff that kind of will clip your phone into it. But I think it's a really, really good option, especially because most people have smartphones and also because video recorders are so much more expensive than audio recorders. So I think personally that a nice phone camera video paired with like a designated audio recorder audio with a microphone is like a perfect combination. I don't know much about recording with GoPros in particular. I know that one issue with GoPros is that they can sometimes distort the image a little bit, especially if you're doing like the zero point 0.5 or like very wide angle. Um, but those can be a good option, especially if you want something kind of small and discreet, something that doesn't kind of get in the way of stuff. But I don't know too much. I've not never personally used a GoPro camera. In terms of where you can archive audio and video recordings, I would say one place to contact you can contact Kaipuleo Hone, which is the archive here at the University of Hawaii. Um, I think if you just go online and type in Kaipuleo Hone, I can type in the chat. Um, I think on the website where that is, I think, sorry, on that website, there should be the contact information for Leah Papas, who is a professor in our department. She's currently the one overseeing that. And so she's the one to send requests for archiving stuff there. I know Paradisic and ELAR are also options on Paradisic, I think is the spelling of that. And then ELAR. Earlier, how many times should an item or word list? Oh, good question. Okay, so about three, yeah, your renter is definitely 100% correct. About three is a good number. Two is passable. You don't want to do just one because sometimes people will stumble over a word. Or usually getting about three is a good number. When I do recordings, if it's just individual words, might try to get like 4 or 5 if it's like a short word list. But if it's kind of a long one, then three is a good number for that. Sorry, can people hear me? I saw that someone's having issues hearing me. Okay, cool. Yeah, thank you. Any other questions? Thank you guys for the good questions. Yeah, so one of the things you can run through, so that's a little bit hard. So if you have a good recording done with a designated audio recorder, um, the goal of those is to pick up speech as what is it? kind of as accurately as possible in terms of like what actually leaves people's mouths. So those will be like kind of the most accurate. And so you don't really want to run those through anything because then you will lose the frequencies you want. But if there's a lot of background noise or it's maybe a compressed file, then you can run it through stuff. I know Audacity is a good program for that. You can also do that in DaVinci Resolve. These are the ones I use. And you can kind of run it through like what's called like filters to kind of filter out certain sounds. It's not, I guess, ideal. Ideally, right, you would have like a very clean audio file. Um, but you just want to be careful when you're pulling out and filtering for frequencies because, right, especially things like sh, these kind of have high frequencies, and if you cut them off too much, then you'll lose information. How many hours or minutes is ideal for video and audio recording? Okay. Let's hit those audio. Okay. So how many hours or minutes is ideal for video and audio recording? Um, I think it really depends on the situation. When I am taking recordings, I try to aim for about 20 minutes to half an hour and then kind of give a break to my participants. This lets me make sure that A, I don't have like one super, super long file that's gonna get messed up possibly if something happens. And then um, right, you also want to give people a break and let them kind of like chill out and relax. But if someone is like talking and they're just like really, they're telling a story or something and they're really into the story, I'm not gonna like cut them off and be like, okay, guys, half an hour is over. Like we gotta take a break. So it kind of just depends on the situation, and whatever the participants are comfortable with. Getting good volume with the audio recorders. I'd say the most kind of helpful things with those good volume is making sure you check the gain. So, you can adjust it, right? It can take in more sound, it can take in less sound, and then also making sure that the microphone that you're using is positioned in such a way that it is as close to the person as possible and picking up as much of the audio as they can. So positioning for the microphone and then also being able to adjust is really important. Microphone for phonetic analysis. Okay, I am a fan of headphone microphones, at least for the stuff that I do. My participants that I work with in the community I work with are fine wearing like a headset. Some people aren't. So in that case, I think a lapel mic is good. Oh, let's see, there's like an Audio Technica one that's quite good. I think it's around 100, $150. And then the ones that I use, it's what? Shure SM35 is the headphone microphones that I use. They're about 89. I think they're about $100 each. And I use those. They're adjustable, and they're very good for like even in like bad weather. It's quite warm and humid and stuff where I work, and they held up really good against the weather. So those are my recommendations. Using data bundles for sessions is expensive because I'm jealous and have training support, please. Um, data bundle. I'm not sure what data bundles are. Lawrence, if you could maybe tell me what that is. Um, yes, but yeah, it definitely stuff is really expensive. Yes. Oh my gosh, I love Prot. I spend most of my time on Prot, unfortunately. Prot is a really great thing to use for transcribing audio recordings. I would say if you are recording or if you are transcribing video recording, then a program called Elon is good to use. I can here in the chat. Um, Elon um, is the name of that. It's very similar to Prot. You can't really take as many acoustic measurements for it, but you can transcribe, you can kind of align stuff with the video, and then it's really nice because it will export to Prot really well. So using both of them together is really nice, as long as the tiers are named the same way. Saturation, 6 hours of audio recording. Saturation meaning, sorry, real quick. Um, sorry, I just have a question. We have been taught that to reach saturation, we have to have at least 6 hours of audio recording. And when you mean saturation, do you mean kind of like having enough audio recordings? If so, okay, awesome. I'm not super familiar with like, I guess how much audio recording you need. Our goal is always to have as much as possible. I was just saying like in terms of like chunking. So I do like smaller chunks, but I try to get as much audio as I can, if that helps. It's really interesting to know that 6 hours is what people are doing though. That's not really my ex area of expertise in terms of, I guess, like pedagogy and things like that. Ma'am, the ISO code of endangered languages are same or are they different? Because in our country, I have seen the same ISO code of endangered languages. Um, so as I was saying, some languages, so the ISO doesn't necessarily, it tries to do as much as possible in terms of identifying individually different languages, but when it comes to kind of, you know, what is a language, what is a dialect, what is a variety, there's a lot of disagreement in that. And so sometimes that's kind of where it breaks down. So sometimes there will be like one ISO code to cover a variety of different, like what is really like our individual languages, but like maybe politically is only considered like a dialect or something like that. So that is one of kind of the issues with ISO codes. Another option to use is what's called glotto codes, and these are much better at having individual ones for dialects and very and like varieties and stuff, or what is, those. But what is a language, really? For every recording. Wait, is it important to introduce the interviewee and interviewer for every recording? If the interviewee opts for verbal consent, is it okay to take a separate audio or continue in the same recording? That is okay. So it's kind of two questions. I'll answer the first one and then the second part. Um, so it is important to introduce the interviewer and interviewee for each recording, uh, because especially if the recordings are not going to be linked, because you want to know who is talking in each one, and that's important. If the person is okay with um, having their name on record, right? Because sometimes they're not. So a lot of times I have some people who don't really want to be known by name, so I give them a participant number, and so I say like, "This is Jillian with participant one." So you can do that, but it is important to introduce that and do the metadata for each recording, so just in case like the recordings get separated, even if you're recording all in one day, right? But the recordings get separated, you don't know what belongs to what, and it can kind of get confusing from there. And in terms of verbal consent, it really is depending on your IRB and how you choose to do it. Some people have the person give oral consent at the beginning of each recording, even if one person is making multiple recordings. But it is also fine to take one recording for that person. That's their kind of their blanket verbal consent, if that's what is written and approved of in your IRB or whatever consent process you have. How many informants are recommended for documenting one language? What a good question. Oh, I don't have a great answer for that. Um, in Again, it depends on the language and it depends on how many people you have access to, I think, and who are interested in being recorded. Um, what we tend to do in my program is we usually have kind of like one or two main consultants that we work with. These are the people who kind of we're transcribing with, we're doing a lot of recordings with. Um, but then we also take recordings and stuff like that and get stories and knowledge and other things from a bunch of other different people. And then, but when we, in terms of like transcribing and translating and stuff like that, generally working with kind of a small group of people is what is just kind of easiest. It's really hard to get a bunch of people to agree on one thing or to all be in the same room at the same time. But in terms of if you're trying to document, the widest breadth of the language as possible, it's nice to be able to talk to as many people as you can. Um, yeah, sorry, I don't have a good answer for how many are recommended, but I guess as many as you can get really and who like want to be a part of it. Are we also able to consider the age and speech capability of the language consultants? Like, for example, an elder in the community who could still talk or provide data. Yeah, you want to talk to as many people as you can. And oftentimes, so I study phonetics and I also study sociolinguistics. So I'm really interested in the speech of everyone, and also kind of how age and other societal factors kind of interact with how people speak. So it's if you're trying to get again the full breadth of the language as possible, it's really nice to talk to as many people as possible, even if people don't feel as comfortable in the language, right? That's still they're still a part of the speech community. They're still a part of that language, and you want to kind of have that for documentation purposes if they're comfortable with it. Are there any more questions? They're good questions, guys. Making me think. Oh, I'm gonna stop sharing for right now. Sorry. To introduce the interviewee, what language is better, English or the mother tongue? I think it's usually what we call like the working language. So whatever language like you and the people you're working with are speaking and kind of writing in and things like that. You can also do it in both. That's an option. Um, like if you're working with people in the contact languages like French, for example, you could do the metadata in French, or whatever language is kind of the language that you and your collaborators are all using and working in. When people archive on university sites, are the right to the files protected? I think that is between the depositor and the repository or the institution that they are depositing to. Um, I think each institution is slightly different in what they um, have, the protections and stuff. I'm trying to think what ours are here. Um, I know, so the recordings that I am taking, depending on the research situation. So like sometimes you have research permits and you have agreements with the countries that you work with. So like all of my data belongs to like the Yapese government and the people of Yap. So like the intellectual properties and stuff like that belong to them. If that helps. Yeah, it just depends on which archive, I think. Any other questions? Oh, one other thing I'll say about archives is that a lot of the times you can choose who has access to things. So if there's recordings that the community they want to have it for future use, but they only want community members to be able to access it, that's a possibility. Or if they want anyone to be able to access it and they just kind of sit there in the archive, that's also a possibility. So you can choose the privacy settings on there as well. Yeah. Okay. Um, all right. I guess if there are no other questions, thank you guys so much for coming to this session. Thank you guys for your wonderful questions and for engaging with this. It's really exciting to see so many people interested in language documentation. So thank you guys.